Sorry I've been absent for a little while. I've been focusing on finishing my book. The manuscript is complete now, so I should be able to devote some more time to making videos. It's been a little over 3 years since I released my video titled The 100 Club. In that video, I took the Credit Suisse Global Wealth Data Book for 2018 and postulated that if gold was allocated across the population in the same percentages as the other forms of wealth, that it would only take 100 ounces of gold to be in the top 0.1% of all gold holders. In order to achieve the same status in terms of other forms of wealth, it would have required $5 to $10 million. 100 ounces of gold seemed like a very achievable goal at the time, at least on the date of that video, because gold only cost a little over $1,200 an ounce. Achieving elite status in terms of gold ownership certainly seemed an easier feat than achieving the elite status in terms of ownership of financial assets. So I challenged my viewers at that time to consider joining the 100 ounce club. I made a promise to cheer in the comment section every time someone told me that they made it. So far, I've been very pleased with the number of people who have told me that they have made it their goal to do so. And I've been delighted every time someone told me that they actually achieved the goal. I think some of them were actually surprised at how quickly they got there once they set their mind to it. Just this past week, I received an email from a subscriber who I will simply refer to as Scott. It was so touching and motivating that I thought I would share it with you. I got his permission, of course, and I'm going to read it to you now. He says, "Hi, Paul. I'm writing to tell you that today, March 24th, 2022, I've officially joined the 100 Club. I purchased my very first ounce 12 years ago on April 19th, 2010 for $1,313. 12 years ago, I was living in a big house in Hawaii that I could not afford. I was massively in debt and struggling to pay, well, everything. But somehow, I managed to keep stacking, without knowing how much I wanted to have. Around that time, my views on the US dollar, currency, and the government have been shattered following the great financial crisis of 2008. As I was watching the value of my house plummet 40% and the money printing machine inflate the money supply and wreck my purchasing power, in my opinion, the financial system died in 2008 and never recovered, and the US dollar was on the trajectory of a doomed existence. I had just finished reading Mike Maloney's book, Guide to Investing in Gold and Silver, and learned about the history of money, fiat currency, central banks, and how currency is created. I also learned where this all ends up. Gold wins. I left the financial wreckage, which was worsening for me in Hawaii as the housing market was still crashing, and retreated back to my condo in Virginia. I continued to stack, still not having a goal, and a few years later came across your 100 Club video. Now I had a goal for my stacking. By that time, I was maybe only 10% of the way there. Having lost so much financially by a life that I could not afford back in Hawaii and the effects of the global financial crisis, I tightened up, determined to make it to the 100 Club. With expenses outpacing income, I sold my house in Hawaii at a 6-figure loss and moved back to my condo in Virginia and sold my sports car and bought an old used pickup truck, which is now 15 years old and still running. I went into full minimalist mode. My only furniture is just a used armchair and a folding table in the living room, a bed, and a desk that I made out of free shipping pallets. My table lamps and vacuum cleaner I found in the dumpster area of the condo complex. I had lived large before at the cost of a massive debt and financial wreckage. Now it was time to live free. All my debts were paid off. I canceled all unnecessary expenses like TV, my living expenses were at a bare minimum, and even with just a modest income, 50% below the median per capita for my county, my stacking started to accelerate. Today, March 24th, 2022, at 53 years old, I made it to the 100 Club. A 12-year journey of 1 ounce at a time, from living beyond my means, learning about money and gold, setting a goal, erasing all debt, giving up large living to live free, to arrive at a point of total financial peace, which is worth its weight in gold, 100 ounces to be exact. I hope that you found my story interesting. Scott. I was smiling ear to ear when I read Scott's words. In fact, my eyes even welled up a little bit because I was so moved by his accomplishment. Honestly, they're welling up a little bit right now. Before I move on to show where 100 ounces fits in the current wealth pyramid, I thought I'd comment a little bit about Scott's note. Scott didn't really have a specific goal, at least not early on. As of 3 years ago, he had managed to accumulate about 10 ounces of gold, because, as he said, he was about 10% of the way there. He had lost a lot, but still had his roughly 10 ounces. He decided to make wealth building a serious goal and focused on gold as his target. Over the next 3 years, he attacked this goal with a vengeance. He seriously cut his expenses and started accumulating as much gold as he could. In 3 years' time, he managed to make it the rest of the way to 100 ounces. That's a rate of more than 2 ounces per month, on an income 50% lower than the per capita for where he lived. Such a savings rate would be unfathomable for most people, and yet he did it. This is the benefit of having a very specific and meaningful goal. Scott wanted it. He wanted it badly. He focused on the goal, and he made it. Now, an interesting observation that I'd like to make about gold from a personal experience is its ability to accelerate the desire to save and reduce the desire to spend money on other things. Holding an ounce of gold in the hand can be a very emotional experience. It makes you want to buy more. Selling it can also be very emotionally painful. And this makes gold quite different than other assets that a person can buy. It's much less painful to part with paper currency. It's even less painful to write a check. Easier still is swiping a credit card. But parting with an ounce of gold, that hurts. No other asset, as far as I'm concerned, generates this level of emotional energy. Now, would Scott have managed to save at the rate that he did if he decided he wanted to accumulate $190,000, which is the approximate value of his 100 ounces? Possibly. It's hard to say. But I'd be willing to guess that a bunch of digits in a bank account would have presented a mighty temptation to go back and buy that sports car. So, congratulations, Scott. Well done. And congratulations to the rest of you who have made it into this elite club. I'm really happy for you. Now, before we celebrate too hard, we need to check to make sure that the yardstick hasn't moved. Is 100 ounces still as significant as it was back then? Let's take a look. Let's use as a reference Credit Suisse's June 2021 Global Wealth Report to calibrate our thinking. There are a couple of key figures that I'm going to use. This one shows a high-level view. According to the report, there was about $418 trillion of total wealth spread out across the population at the time that the report was written. There were also 5.23 billion adults total worldwide. The pyramid shows how all of the wealth was distributed among these 5.23 billion adults. The numbers on the left are wealth ranges. The numbers in the middle are percentages of the population who commanded the levels of financial wealth shown on the left. For example, 2.9 billion people, or 55% of the world's adult population, had a net worth of less than $10,000. About 1.7 billion people, or 32.8% of the adult population, had between $10,000 and $100,000 of net wealth. 583 million adults, or 11.1%, had net worths of $100,000 to $1 million, and 56 million people, or about 1.1% of the world's adult population, had more than $1 million of net worth each. Now, we can use these figures to estimate how these numbers would translate to gold ownership. According to my historical data, there have been about 6 billion ounces of gold mined throughout history. If there is $418 trillion worth of wealth in total in the world, this would mean that there's about 1 ounce of gold for every $70,000 worth of other types of wealth. A little simple math would suggest that if the top 1.1% of the world's population owned $1 million or more each, then this would correspond to about 14 ounces of gold. The key assumption here, of course, is that gold is allocated in much the same way as the rest of the wealth. It may or may not be a valid assumption, but absent data, it's the only assumption that we can really make. So if you have 14 ounces of gold, congratulations, you are likely in the top 1.1%. Few can achieve such a lofty goal. Think about it this way. There is only a little over 1 ounce of gold above ground for every adult in the world. So now let's ask ourselves what it would take to be in the top 0.1%. And for this, I'll need to refer to another figure in the Credit Suisse report. Here's the breakdown of the elite of the elite. About 49 million of the aforementioned 56 million of the top 1.1% are at the bottom of this pyramid. This group has an individual net worth of about $1 million to $5 million apiece. Now, above this, there are the super elite. There are less than 5 million people out of 5.23 billion adults in this group. It's about 0.13% of the total world's population who have a net worth of over $5 million each. If there is 1 ounce of gold for every $70,000, this would translate to 71 ounces per adult in this group. So as far as the new numbers are concerned, 100 ounces is still a valid target to consider yourself to be in the elite of the elite in terms of gold ownership. So for all of you who have managed to make it into this very elite group, like Scott, congratulations. I'm extremely happy for all of you. And in the future, if we're all buying our gas with gold-backed rubles, you'll be okay. Have a nice weekend, everyone.